In a world where martial guilds rule by raw firepower and legendary blades, my awakening ceremony was a public execution of my dignity. While the elite heirs summoned crimson dragon gauntlets and celestial swords that split the clouds, my soul contract manifested as a floating, useless glass marble. The High Elders laughed, stripping my family of our noble rank and throwing me into the slums as a cursed, defenseless nobody. The top guildmaster literally stepped on my face, mocking my pathetic glass magic. But none of those arrogant fools realized a fundamental rule of cosmic alchemy. Glass isn't just fragile ornament, it is a material capable of refracting absolute universal light. And today, when they marched their massive armies to execute my people, I decided to show them what happens when my fragile glass magic resonates with every single piece of forged steel on the entire planet. Welcome to Anime Echo Tales. Today we are breaking down the legendary story of the F-rank discard, who brought the entire world's military elite to their absolute knees. Our story takes place in the sprawling, hyper-militarized empire of Okavan, a domain entirely governed by the absolute supremacy of weapon awakening. In this world, at the age of 18, every human soul must stand before the ancient obsidian monolith to draw out their life weapon. If you pull a heavy steel broadsword or a dense localized cannon, your social status is solidified as a wealthy protector of the realm. If you pull a legendary glowing S-rank relic, you are instantly elevated to a living god, showered in endless gold, land, and political power. My family, the House of Ren, had maintained a proud, unbroken 300-year lineage of producing elite, ironclad tank commanders. My father expected me to awaken an indestructible obsidian shield. The local media, the academy students, and the neighboring rival guilds had all gathered in the grand amphitheater, their greedy eyes locked on me to see if the Ren family would continue to dominate the empire's frontline defense. I remember stepping onto the cold marble stage, my hands trembling slightly as I pressed my palms against the jagged surface of the monolith. The ancient stone pulsed, a wave of deep psychic energy rushing through my veins to scan the core of my soul. But instead of the familiar deep rumbling of crushing iron or the fiery spark of heavy gunpowder, a freezing hollow silence filled the arena. A sudden blinding flash of transparent light erupted from my chest, and as the smoke cleared, there was no massive shield, no heavy lance, and no mechanical weapon. Suspended quietly in the palm of my hand was a tiny, perfectly clear glass marble. It didn't possess a single drop of destructive aura. It didn't radiate elemental heat. It was just an ordinary, fragile piece of common glass that a child could crush beneath their heel. The grand arena fell into a deathly, suffocating silence for 3 seconds before the entire crowd erupted into a deafening roar of mocking laughter. The high elders of the evaluation committee looked down at me with absolute, unadulterated disgust. The head evaluator didn't even bother to record my name, casually raising his voice to declare my awakening an absolute failure, an F-rank anomaly of the lowest order. Standing in the front row of the student section was Lucius, the arrogant, newly awakened S-rank heir of the Golden Vanguard Guild. Lucius had just awakened a massive, lightning-infused halberd that radiated pure kinetic destruction. He stepped onto the stage, intentionally bumping his heavy shoulder into mine, causing my tiny glass marble to slip from my fingers and clatter pathetic across the stone floor. He raised his heavy iron boot, bringing it down directly onto my hand, grinding my fingers into the dirt while his lackeys cheered. He told me that a trash item like glass belonged exactly where I belonged, shattered in the gutter, serving as a reminder that the weak exist solely to be trampled by the strong. Because of my awakening failure, the Empire's High Council acted with swift, merciless bureaucracy. My family was stripped of our military titles, our ancestral estate was aggressively seized by Lucius's guild, and we were forcefully exiled to the decrepit, lawless slums of the Outer Rim. My father, broken by the public shame and stripped of his iron shield, fell severely ill, leaving my younger sister and me to scavenge for survival in the trash heaps of the city. For 3 long years, the entire world treated us like biological waste. The academy students would occasionally ride their armored transports through our slums, purposefully firing low-grade elemental rounds at our ramshackle homes just to watch us scatter in absolute terror. Lucius had become a celebrated military general, his power growing exponentially as he led the Empire's forces to conquer neighboring territories using an endless array of high-grade steel weaponry. But while the world assumed I was rotting away in depression, I was quietly spending every single night inside a hidden underground cave, studying the true unmapped physics of my F-rank glass marble. The Empire's weapon system was completely blinded by raw, brutal muscle. They believed that a weapon's worth was determined entirely by its mass, its weight, and its capacity to hit things hard. They completely overlooked the concept of elemental resonance. Through thousands of hours of intense, silent meditation, I discovered that my glass magic did not possess physical mass because it was a pure, absolute catalyst for structural vibration. My soul wasn't weak. It was dialed into a frequency so astronomically high that regular iron and steel could not comprehend it. Glass is formed by melting chaotic sand under absolute white-hot heat into a perfectly smooth, uniform molecular network. I realized that if I poured my internal mana into the marble, I could manipulate the molecular boundaries of any crystalline or metallic structure I could see, matching its atomic frequency until its structural integrity completely vanished. The ultimate test of my hidden power arrived on the eve of the Empire's annual Conquering Festival. Lucius and the High Elders had decided to completely clear out the outer rim slums to construct a massive, luxurious military monument celebrating their global dominance. They didn't offer relocation. They didn't offer compensation. They marched an entire division of 3,000 heavily armored vanguard knights directly into our residential district, their swords drawn, their mechanical repeating rifles loaded with lethal rounds, ready to slaughter anyone who dared to protest their eviction. My sister clung to my coat, sobbing hysterically as the massive steel boots of the vanguard army marched down our dirt roads, flattening our meager shelters. Lucius rode at the absolute front of the vanguard, mounted on a massive armored beast, his S-rank lightning halberd resting casually on his shoulder. He spotted me standing completely alone in the middle of the main crossroad, obstructing his path. He let out a loud, arrogant laugh, calling out to his soldiers to halt. He looked down at me with the exact same condescending eyes from 3 years ago, asking if I had brought my pathetic little glass marble to fight his Iron Legion. He raised his halberd, channeling a massive surge of blue electricity through the blade, declaring that he would personally execute me to signify the complete eradication of the slum's trash lineage. I didn't run. I didn't beg. I slowly reached into my pocket and pulled out that exact same, pristine glass marble. The surrounding soldiers burst into snickers, mocking my defiance. But as Lucius swung his halberd downward to unleash a lethal wave of lightning, I quietly closed my eyes and whispered a single word: resonance. Instantly, the tiny glass marble in my hand began to glow with a brilliant, absolute white light. A high-pitched harmonic frequency, a sound like a billion crystal glasses vibrating in perfect unison, rippled outward from my body in a massive circular shockwave. The wave swept across the entire 3,000-man vanguard army in a fraction of a second. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Lucius's halberd was just inches from my face. But suddenly, the brilliant reflective gleam of his S-rank steel blade vanished. The dark, industrial iron of his armor began to turn completely translucent. Before a single person could gasp, the metallic structure of Lucius's legendary halberd completely transformed. The heavy, indestructible steel shifted into brittle, transparent glass. The blue lightning trapped inside the weapon instantly shattered the newly formed glass blade into a million harmless, glittering shards that rained down onto the dirt. Lucius's eyes went completely wide with absolute primal horror as he looked down at his empty, broken hilt. But the nightmare was just beginning for the Vanguard Guild. A chaotic chorus of panic erupted across the entire battlefield as 3,000 knights realized their heavy chestplates, their reinforced gauntlets, their razor-sharp broadswords, and their mechanical assault rifles were rapidly turning clear. The dense military-grade steel was systematically losing its carbon structure, shifting into delicate paper-thin green and blue glass. The sheer physical weight of the soldiers moving inside their suits caused their own armor to violently fracture, shattering into millions of microscopic pieces that tinkled harmlessly against the ground. Within a matter of 10 seconds, an entire elite, heavily mechanized division of the Empire's greatest army was left standing completely naked, weaponless, and entirely exposed in the middle of the dirt, their multi-million-dollar arsenal reduced to piles of broken decorative sand. Lucius fell off his mount, tumbling backward into the dirt, his hands scraping against the sharp shards of what used to be his pride and joy. He looked up at me, his face completely pale, his teeth chattering in absolute, unadulterated terror. He tried to summon his internal mana to manifest a secondary weapon, but the moment his energy touched the ambient air, the glass frequency I had anchored to the environment instantly neutralized his power, shattering his internal circuits. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, the glass marble floating serenely above my palm, casting a brilliant, blinding reflection across his sweaty, terrified face. I looked down at the S-rank genius who had trampled my life, and I reminded him that the world he built on the backs of iron and blood was nothing more than a fragile illusion, and with a single breath, I could break his entire empire paper thin.